الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين. اللهم ربنا أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر أولياءك في غزة وفي الضفة وفي فلسطين كلها وفي الشام كلها. اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم اخرجنا من إخواننا في غزة وفي لبنان وفي اليمن وفي مشارق الأرض ومغاربها وفي السودان وفي مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم نفس كربنا وكربهم وثبت أقداما والتفنا بهم يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم انصر من نصر غزة وأهل غزة. اللهم اقتل من خذل غزة وأهل غزة. اللهم جب من جب أهل غزة. اللهم خفف من خاف أهل غزة. اللهم عطش من عطش أهل غزة. اللهم انصر من نصر الإسلام والمسلمين واخذل من خذل الإسلام والمسلمين. وصلى وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد بعدد أوراق الأشجار وبعدد أقطار الأمطار وبعدد دواب البرار والبحار وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم. اللهم صل على محمد بعدد كل ذرة ألف مرة وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين آمين يا رب العالمين. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman. So the scientific view we'll stop here. I think it's the third time that I missed not recorded voice, I said. So let's try once more. So he's saying the scientific view of nature as pure materiality is associated with the Newtonian view of space as an absolute void in which things are situated. So maybe he's saying this as a matter of fact is situated in the absolute void, but it doesn't need to be. You can combine a scientific view of nature as pure materiality with a relational notion of a space, for example. And I was saying that this attitude of science has no doubt ensured speedy progress. It's not clear what he is referring to here. I guess scientific view of nature as pure materiality has ensured speedy progress. What does he mean by speedy progress? Let's dwell a bit. Let's dwell a bit on that. Okay, this time I think we are able to record it. Okay. So the concept pure materiality. I don't know what pure means there. Maybe mean hard materialism, like hard determinism, but I'm not. It's pure materiality in the sense that a monist conception of material, but I doubt it that early scientists were monist, all of them. Or was Newton a monist? I doubt it very much. Even Newton, a physicist, might not have been monist. How could he be? I mean, he could have been, but you don't need to be a monist unless he's referring to monism. I don't know what else he could mean by pure materiality here. Anyhow, so what does he mean by progress? I think by progress he must mean not progress in a in physics as a discipline as such, but progress in able to overcome nature in the sense that overcome its resistance and be able to manipulate it through the use of technologies. If that's what he means, then early science had hardly anything to do with material progress. And Newton's physics gave its fruit only slowly over the next 2 centuries, or at least 1 century. That's the first thing. So if he is talking about progress as in technological dominance, why you need a pure materiality to progress in that sense is not clear, because if according to Iqbal, later physics, for example Einstein's physics and quantum physics, gave up pure materiality, but still continued its dominance over nature and progress in that sense. That in itself shows that progress is not limited to pure materiality, but maybe saying that at least at the start, pure materiality, because the focus was on mechanics, laws of motion, and all those, and and that was applied to, I don't know, constructing engines and all those things, and machines, building machines of all sorts. And obviously, they rely highly on laws of motion and their understanding, and energy and matter, etc., and their relationship and their mutual transformations, etc., which is which is already a step away from pure materiality, by the way. So unless he's saying that because the earlier phase of physics was, and in progress in physics in his sense, was closely related to mechanics, and mechanics somehow needed a pure materialistic conception of space and nature in order to arrive at laws which were able to, which helped us to overcome the resistance of nature, then you can make that argument, but it's not very clear. Okay, I mean, it's not very clear why you need pure materiality to make that sort of progress. That's what I was saying. Anyway, let us continue with this attitude of science has no doubt ensured its speedy progress, but the bifurcation of a total experience into two opposite domains of mind and matter has today forced it, in view of its own domestic difficulties. I don't know which difficulty they're talking about. It completely ignored. So, but the bifurcation of a total experience to two opposite domains of mind and matter has today forced it, in view of its own, to reconsider, he means, the problem which in the beginning of its, to consider the problem which in the beginning of its career it completely ignored. What is the problem? Problem of interaction between matter and mind. And I'm sure science never actually, even pure materialistic science never actually denied that mind exists. We might have might have a materialistic conception of how the mind functions, but that is already a step away from the so-called pure materiality. The criticism of the foundations of mathematics has fully disclosed that the hypothesis of pure materiality, enduring stuff situated in this fluid space is unworkable, and enduring stuff that is matter in absolute is unworkable. Well, when it is unworkable, and that's how science works. So when it doesn't work in certain domain, then it revise its assumptions, etc., accordingly. But that doesn't mean that these are domestic difficulties. You still use Newton's mechanistic physics in its domain, and so Einstein theory and Einstein relativity physics, quantum physics, and Newtonian physics, they live side by side because they have workable or working hypotheses regarding different domains. So I don't think that there has been any domestic difficulties which physics faced, apart from the difficulties when certain assumptions don't work in certain domains, then it has to revise those assumptions and for that domain, or revise um, you know as a whole, depending on what can be achieved. But in this context, what happened is it revised its assumption regarding motion in certain arenas when the speed is really high, closing to the speed of light. But in normal arenas, it still work with uh, Newtonian assumptions. So that's how science works. But this talk about domestic difficulties and problems, this is the talk of philosopher and philosopher of science. And I don't think that necessarily, and those few philosophers who do theoretical physics and who are close to philosophers of science, in their ambition, they might work on these issues, but the the domestic difficulties of science, otherwise the domestic difficulties of science Alamic Bal is talking about, doesn't make much sense, or it does make sense, but it doesn't, I think, apply to science as such. Now it goes on to say, is space an independent void in which things are situated and which would remain intact if all things were withdrawn? Well, the answer from point of view of Newton is yes, the space would remain. The space is absolute, but from the point of view of Leibniz, for example, or Leibnizians, but it's not clear whether Leibniz, it's hard to, actually pinpoint Leibniz's own views sometime, but if you are a relationalist regarding space, then space wouldn't remain. And physicists, you will find both types of physicists who believe in, even today, there are physicists who believe in absolute space, there are other physicists that don't believe in absolute space, and both type of assumptions can go, they don't affect their physics as such. It might affect how they basically theorize it overall, but it doesn't affect the working of physics as such, at least in the domains which it works normally. So Alamic Bal's, but we should remember that his whole purpose is to bring us back to his idealistic conception of nature and conception of nature in which reality is actually a living being. And then obviously the problem of motion and all those problems goes away somehow. So he has its ulterior overarching purpose for bringing in these debates here. The ancient Greek philosopher Zeno approached the problem of space through the question of movement in space. His arguments for the unreality of movement are well known to the students of philosophy, and ever since his days, the problem has persisted in history of thought and received the keenest attention from successive generations of thinkers. Okay, but what that has to do with physics? Two of these arguments may be noted here. Zeno, I think he's now starting with Zeno, so we'll just stop here and pick it up from here next week, next time, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk wa sallallahu wa sallam ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa azwajihi wa dhurriyyatihi ajma'in bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Amin ya rabbal alamin.